So I got involved in the union a number of years back. Initially, what drew me to it was in part just sort of a history of activism and always looking for sort of those activist and community circles, as well as direct experience here, just knowing that we had a great need at this institution for transparency and greater accountability, and unions and activist communities can really be a great way to bring about that kind of accountability and transparency and kind of build a better culture, a better community here at the university. I was at UC Irvine when, as grad students, we organized, and I saw what a difference a union made in our own experience and our time there. And so I was, at the time, a junior faculty. I was not tenured yet. I had, probably when I mostly started to get active in the pre-card drive and then into the card drive, I had just switched departments, and I had switched departments in part at a time when things were fairly contentious in that department. And one of the things that time there exposed for me was how a lot of decisions were made in an untransparent way, and that there was a culture of not really talking about how decisions got made. We received letters in the mail that told us what our new salary was. You actually had to back calculate to figure out what the actual percentage was. And so everything was kind of done in this way that it felt like it was a culture where you couldn't really talk about the work conditions, right? It had this sense of being in this box of higher education where if you talk about the working conditions, then you don't really belong here, in a sense, right? It had that aura of elitism in a way, and yet it felt like there was a lot bubbling right under the surface, that there was a lot of people who knew there were problems, who had a vision for something else, but there wasn't really a space yet to talk about these things. And I think what union organizing brought for us was a space to talk about these things, to start to share experiences, to start to see the patterns more fully, because I know that's what it did for me. There was always these ways in which we could, create rationales or logics or explanations for individual problems, or kind of narrated it away or into a reasonable, or if not reasonable, livable, tolerable solution. And what this did was it really made us aware of the patterns and how we were all affected by these, and that there were great injustices, and there were ways in which our work landscape was changing, particularly for non-tenure track and adjunct faculty, right? The ways in which they were treated, their security, their pay, all of that happened, somewhat. I don't mean secrecy in a negative way, in the sense of completely assuming that people were up to no good, but it just happened in a way that it really wasn't done in the light of day, and there was, for me, in my own personal experience and hearing the experiences of others, it became more and more apparent that we would have to work collectively to really push on and change the culture of the university to address some of these issues in a more sustainable and to really get get that transparency and accountability in a more sustainable way. To me, it's made the world a difference. It's I started as a junior faculty member, and I've gotten tenured in that same process. I was on the first bargaining team during my sabbatical, and so it's been an amazing process here, I think, of doing a couple of things. One, the very things that drove us to this, or for me in particular, was these issues of transparency and accountability and really fairness. And I feel like the process of unionizing, the process of the union becoming more a part of the institutional culture, has really made a difference in terms of making sure that people's experiences, the way in which they are affected by policies, how policies are created, made, authorized, all of that happens in a transparent way now. It may not be perfect, right? And there's still a lot of work to be done, but at least it's clear that we're all in the process. And that's a huge difference from before. And as a result of being a part of the process, the other second part of it, I think, is that it's really changed the culture. It's changed the culture of the institution. And again, it's not perfect, it's not complete, it's still a work in progress. But I feel like as faculty, and quite frankly, as faculty also talking with other groups on campus, right, other unionized groups on campus in particular, we're really seeing how we're really all in this together in a sense, right, that we're all working towards this larger core mission of the university, and we all have our roles to play, but we also have roles to play in making sure that the institution supports each of us in the roles that we play, and making sure that we are arguing for for things to happen transparently, that there's accountability when that transparency doesn't happen, or accountability for how the process happens or the outcomes, but also that we can push for fairness, right? Once we start to know the patterns of the things that we've seen before, once things do start to get talked about when they're in the light of day, then we can push for things like floors, right, for non-tenure track faculty, when before there was huge variability in what they made, and some were full-time and on food stamps, right? I mean, that's just an injustice. And so we've not fully completed that work that needs to be done. I think there's still a lot more work to be done, but I think at the very least, I feel like in my everyday, I can see the effect of the union, and it's a good thing on campus for the community that it's built, the way it's pushed for the transparency and the accountability, and the way that, frankly, it's improved the compensation that we have all had. It's improved the job security. So I imagine that it's had a bit of an invisible hand in retaining some very good people who might have left because of the insecurity that they held in their position, but that they may have now. And that's where I hope, of course, that will continue to improve and make things even better and stronger as we continue to work. But for now, I see the union working every day to build a better institutional culture and a better community on campus. So my vision for the future is still really rooted in the core values that led me to the organizing, which was really around this transparency and accountability and fairness. And I think there's still a lot of ways in which that's the work that's ahead of us. We sort of apply those values to each sort of new issue that comes up, in essence. But in terms of the most pressing, urgent issues, I think one of the top ones for me is really getting transparency around budget and financing and the financial priorities of the institution, so that when we look at the budget and we know what the budget is, and that would require more transparency on that score, that we can also really see that the budget reflects the priorities that we hold as an institution of higher education, that the educational core mission of the university, the teaching and research arms of the university, and all the support staff that make that happen are supported and reflected in the budget in a way that supports that mission at its key. So that, I think, is the most pressing issue. And then I think related to all of that, some of the most pressing issues for me are in the increased security for non-tenure track faculty. I still think that's one area in which we still have a lot of work to do. I would love to see a much more robust expectation of continued employment so that people really feel secure. We have faculty that have been here, incredible, hardworking faculty that have been here for decades or even maybe 3 years, but they deserve better than to constantly be having to worry about the end of their contract and what that means. And so I think that's an area that we can certainly strengthen. And related to that, I would love to see us be able to continue the work that we've already done around the floors to make sure that we at least have clear minimums so that faculty are getting fairly compensated for the work that we do. So I see those as some of the key issues as we move forward. the union is doing amazing things, and I hope will continue to push on these issues to create a culture, again, that's really rooted in fairness, and rooted in transparency and accountability. And I think all of that, the more inclusive community, the more transparent we are, the better will serve that educational core mission of the university.